In this video, we're going to take a look at the adventure log in Rolescape. So at this point, we've probably filled out our tome of lore with a bunch of information, perhaps some locations, NPCs, events, foes, etc. Maybe uploaded some maps and whatnot. And now we're ready to actually sit down and play the game with some players. And that's what the adventure log is for. So the adventure log keeps track of what happens in the game sessions, how the players interact with content, and just basically the timeline of things that happen. So on the left here, I have the GM's view, and on the right, I have what it might look like on a player's phone. So we'll switch both over here to the adventure log. And we don't have any sessions yet. So as a GM, we can just click here to create the first session. And you can create multiple sessions if you want. We'll create 3 of them for the moment. And you can add a title and a brief summary. I usually put the summary after the session is done because I know it's actually happened then. But if you know what's going to happen, maybe you can put a little summary for the players, and then you can of course edit it afterwards as well. But you'll notice that I have 3 sessions here. It says they're all in preparation. They're marked with a yellow dot, and they don't show up yet for the player. That's because sessions have 3 states they can be in. They can be in preparation, they can be ready to play, and it'll confirm that we actually want to do this. And as soon as it's ready to play, it'll show up for the player as well. And then finally, we can also have the session is done and it's been played. And we'll take a look at each of these in turn and see how it works. So basically the idea is that you start something, you do some prep, you then play the session, and then it's done. And you can see these are kept in kind of a timeline order. You can move these around. And that will allow you to reorder them if you need to. And of course, why would you have more than one item in preparation? Usually in most of my games, I only have one ready to go, or one that I'm preparing, kind of the next one. But sometimes I have games where there's multiple sets of players, and so I have different sessions prepped for each group, or I'll have like 2 or 3 different ideas that I'm kind of playing with, and I'll kind of prep each of them and then decide the last moment kind of which one, or maybe the players have a decision to make, well, we might go here, we might go there, and so you kind of prep a few different things ready for them, and then depending on how they start the session, you go, okay, we've decided we're gonna head here, you can then start that session. But often I have just one in prep. So when a session is in prep, you have this view where it shows your tome of lore entries here, and then it has some columns over here with hidden, active, and visible. So anything that we drag over to hidden will start visible to us as the GM, but not the players. And the idea is that we want to allow the players to keep track of the relevant, like what's going on right now in the game, what tome of lore entries are actually involved at the moment. So I'll drag over one more here, and we'll say that the player character is going to start active. So as soon as the players come in, they're going to see that this player character is in the center of attention. And we can add a foe here, perhaps. We'll make this visible. So in this setup, this foe is going to not be visible to the players at the very beginning of the session. The player character will be shown as being in the center of the action, and they'll be able to see this hailstorms entry here. You can also add handouts, which also start as the same thing. They start hidden, and then you can drag them over to active or visible, either here in prep or during the game session itself, revealing it to the players. To find things in the Tome of Lore, this search here is the same full text search that you have in the Tome of Lore. So it actually searches the content as well as the titles and whatnot. There's a filter bar as well, so you can say, I just want to see locations, okay, and then I can drag something over. Really easy. Once I'm done, this is ready to play. I can either go back to the adventure log list and move it as we did just a moment ago, or I can click on the label here in preparation and say it's now ready to play. And it will show up now for the player who will go in. And so we can see here that they see that the player character is active and there's this event of interest. While for us as the GM, we also see the things we've kind of put into our hidden behind the DM screen, if you will. The Tome of Lore search is still there, so we can still find things quite easily. And we can add handouts. So if something happens at the table, you need to quickly adapt, no problems. As I drag things around, it will immediately appear for the players as well. So let's say that this foe comes in and it immediately appears for the players. This allows them to kind of keep track of what is going on in the game at that moment. So even if there's digressions and role play and whatnot, they don't get lost. I often put the location in the kind of interest and column. It gives them some context, and the players can then click on that and actually see some information about that location. It's the Tome of Lore entry. And they can click on these to get even, to jump to those in the Tome of Lore. It'll take them in a new tab to that Tome of Lore entry. So that's how we can kind of keep the players oriented in the game using Tome of Lore entries. The other half of it is the timeline, and this tracks what occurs in what order in the game. As a GM or as a timeline editor, if we come into settings, you can see there's a timeline editor item here, and so you can add that to players, and then they can also edit the timeline. Some games like that where they'll allow players to actually keep track, and then the GM can just focus on running the game. So whoever can edit the timeline gets this interface at the top here, which has a bunch of buttons that allow you to record different kinds of events. So there's the generic events, then there's an NPC interaction, combat, quest point, level up, loot, end of day, downtime, rest, and travel. So let's say they start off with an NPC interaction. It immediately shows up for the player as well. You can pick an NPC to interact with, say Prince of Wraith. You can also create a new one. And this is really nice especially for improv at the table, right? So if the players, go somewhere where you weren't expecting, or you come up with a really cool idea right at the table, or you're just improvising together, you can create new entries on the fly, NPCs, locations, you name it. This will then appear in the Tome of Lore without any content on it. You can go back later and then fill out information on that Tome of Lore entry. So this is really handy for quickly being able to expand your Tome of Lore based upon what happens in the game. You can then add some notes here, and these notes use the exact same editing that you find in the Tome of Lore. So we can actually say, the character Arahoy meets the prince in the great halls in Iden until they were interrupted by Everard. Cool. And as soon as you click off, it'll show up for the players as well in their timeline. And then you might move on. Maybe they travel, right? And where do they travel? Let's say they travel to Carador. And so at this point, I might put Carador as being active. We'll hide this guy away again. We don't need him. Or maybe we'll keep him. Iden, yeah, we'll keep that there. Move him over to also visible. So now they're moving to Carador. How many days did they travel? Let's say it took them 4 days to get there. And again, it shows up immediately for the players. They traveled 4 days to Carador, and you can make some notes. You can always edit this later, so don't feel like you have to interrupt your game and sit there and type furiously a bunch of notes. You can always come back later, and I often do that myself. You can also click the Show Full Timeline to see all the events. You can go back and change things or edit things. You can delete items. And that's about it, though. There's no more fancy management in play while you're in play. And that's intentional because I don't want Rolescape to become a distraction at the table for my players or me as the GM. Or if I'm a player for my GM. And so there's not a whole lot of fiddly things you can do with the timeline while it's in play. And that prevents that temptation to wait, just hold on and let's take a 5-minute break from the game to get the timeline just right or record this thing that happened in great detail. It's much nicer to do that afterwards, I find. And so again, we're trying not to make Rolescape an interruption during the game, but something that helps it move forward. So as we're editing our timeline and adding things, it shows up for the players, and they can actually keep track of the order things happened, right? So, okay, last thing that happened was they traveled for 4 days to Carador. Before that, they met Prince of Wraith. Once we're done, once the game is complete, you can move it to session is done. And at this point, we get a much simpler view. We can see the Tome of Lore entries that appeared during the game. And we can also edit the timeline if we want. And it shows you, okay, so we had the same timeline, NPC, Prince of Wraith, what happened, traveled 4 days to Carador. But we can also edit it here. And it shows the Tome of Lore kind of things that happened as well in here. But then we can, fill out this, the players went shopping, because that's what they always do when they go to Carador, right? And then once we can finish editing here. Cool. And, I should put on the Tome of Lore entry, not the, there we go. And now it shows up for the players. So now the players can come in at any time that they want, right? We'll go back to the adventure log and they can go, oh, what happened in that session? I can't remember, because that happens all the time, especially if you play infrequently or just life is busy. And they can come back in and they can go, oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. We saw the faux lore. We went to Carador. Arahoy was the player, characters that were, whoever else was playing. Great. Handouts will also be shown here if there were any. And then they can look at the timeline of events. And so paired with the Tome of Lore, this allows you to expand the Tome of Lore, access the information at the game while the game is in play, and then really help your players keep track of what has happened in the game right back to the very beginning of it. So I really hope that you find this useful in tracking and helping your players and you as a GM follow along with what you're creating, that beautiful collective fiction at the table. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.